This room has been my home office and music room since moving into this house back in 2015. So, when I started my YouTube channel in 2017, it only made sense that this would be the place where I make the videos too. And as I started to put more time and effort into my YouTube channel, it made sense to switch this space around to be a more dedicated space for audio and video production. So what I ended up doing was back in 2018, I took my camera one day and just sort of moved the camera around the room until I found something that looked good, which ended up being the blue wall in the background. Actually put the camera in that corner over there with me kind of close to it, and then moved the room around that. So I put a desk here, and basically the thing that I came up with back in that day in 2018 is just how things stayed for the next 6 years. So as much as I could make things look perfect on camera, and I was really happy with how things looked on camera, in person, it just wasn't working anymore. So that's why I decided to change everything, and I'm super glad I did, because it sort of seemed like this might be a minor fix at first, but I did not realize what a massive impact it would have on my entire workflow and what a huge creative block the limitations of my physical space had been. So one of the biggest changes is that everything in here, except for my computer desk in the corner, is on wheels. And that is really cool, because that means everything is totally modular. Even if I have a layout that I want to use most of the time, I can just move things around and then have a lot more space. I can now pull this over here, or basically within 2 to 3 minutes, I could just get everything, except that one desk over there, everything totally out of here and just have a lot more room. Because this space physically is about 12 feet by 12 feet, which is, I know I do this every time, I'm so bad at the metric system, but I'm trying my best. It's 4 meters by 4 meters, 144 square feet. So back in 2018, when I put my main desk kind of over here, that became my main desk, where like my actual work computer was. I needed to do stuff and make videos. And little did I know at the time that there would then be a pandemic, and then I would be working from home full time from there. At the time, I was teaching high school classes online, solely online, for over a year, and then also trying to work up video space. Basically, what I didn't realize was happening was I had this one desk that needed to be like this for video and presenting things and sharing information, but also needed to be a workspace where I could actually work and get stuff done. And it turns out those two things have very different needs. So I needed to split them. And I've seen so many studio tour videos from people where they have multiple like desk setups in one space. And it kind of made something click in my brain where I realized I don't just have to have one desk that needs to do everything, because it's essentially doing nothing really well. It's doing a bunch of things fine, but nothing really well. So I took that, did I say really well? So I took that and I split them apart and put a work desk over here, where the primary focus is, using the computer and getting things done. And then I had to buy a new desk here, which this is just a Husky workbench from Home Depot. This is also a Husky workbench from Home Depot. This was, other than like a couple power adapters, this was actually the only new thing I had to buy when I redid the whole studio, was this desk here. I think it was about $300. And it's a sit-stand desk, so I can crank it up. It's just got a manual hand crank. I was going to go the route and get the fancy electric lift stand, but then I realized, you know what electric desks need? Electricity. And in a space that I was trying to make modular, I didn't want to have like an umbilical cord attached to this desk all the time. I wanted to be able to move it totally freely all the time without having to worry about anything. So this primary focus can be sharing information on video, and this primary focus can be getting work done. Separating the work desk from the video desk was something I desperately needed to do. One of the most delightful things to talk about anytime you talk about a studio tour are lights, And my main key light has not changed in many years. It's still the Nanlite Forza 200. I love this light. It's got a great control interface. And then I have an Aperture Light Dome Mini 2. This is the small, I think it's 30 centimeter light box on it. That's just because even though it doesn't diffuse the light as much, it takes up a lot less space. And so I usually still have this kind of pointed here, bouncing off the wall and the ceiling. And if I turn that off, you can sort of see It really does make a difference. And this light is so bright that I can usually keep it just at 40%. Now the light itself is on an impact rolling stand. This is just a standard size impact rolling stand. This is also the same thing, the bigger version of the impact lowboy that I used on my camera rig a while ago. Let me not tip that over. The difference being that the lowboy is, believe it or not, lower and the regular one is higher. These are both Impact brand, which is like B&H's in-store brand, but they're very, very similar to some stands I've seen from Kupo, K-U-P-O, Kilo Uniform Papa Oscar. So if you don't live in the US, you're unable to purchase from B&H for some reason, I think you can get very similar stands at very similar prices from Kupo. And I like putting them on wheels. I do have sandbags down here, but it's nice to be able to move the light whenever I need it. And especially since I have this space here, this little like B-roll wall, or I need to move things around, there's a lot of versatility, because if I have something set up here and I want an overhead light, or I want the light to be more directed towards the desk, I can then use the, I guess this didn't come with this top part. I put the arm from an Impact C stand I already had on here, so it had the boom arm. The rolling stand was only the straight part first. Probably an important thing to mention. But now I have the versatility of moving this one light all over, even though it stays in the corner most of the time. And there's just one cable for the light, so if I need to move it in the middle of the room, there's just one cable to keep track of. And to turn the light on and off, this is something I've done with a number of my main lights. I just bought these little remotes off of Amazon a while ago. And basically it's just a thing you plug something into, and then you plug that into your wall, and then this turns on and off that thing on the outlet. So this light is just turned on all the time, and then I can push the power button, and it takes a second, but then the light will, there it goes. The light will turn on. It looks like I just had a really good idea. Speaking of good ideas, I should tell you about the rest of the lights in here. This light might count as a second key light. This is an iFootage 60-watt light that's here, and this is one that basically turns on. It's almost my main room light whenever I'm in here, and it's just attached to a Varipole or an auto pole. I forget which version of it. This is the auto pole, but it's the same thing as the Varipole. And then I also have my Lilliput reference monitor, and then also another Nanlite bicolor light, which I use sometimes if I just need a little extra boost of light, especially a bit of a warmer light. And these are attached using this Kupo grip head that has this long adapter in the middle, so I can attach two lights on it. And the monitor is attached using an iFootage friction arm. And this light is in a small lantern, and that's so it gives a soft diffuse light in every direction. This is another 60-watt Nanlite with a 30 centimeter or a small iFootage softbox, same size as the Aperture Light Dome 2 Mini over there, with a grid on it. And this is my hair light or my backlight. It was specifically positioned for when my desk was over here, and so it still works most of the time, but it doesn't work if I'm over here. So it's not used as often every single time, but still, since I mainly film in this space kind of down over here, it's still pretty practical. Another thing here in this space, because I was working with limited space, I used to have a ceiling fan in here. I took the ceiling fan out and put a very low profile LED light. So this is, if I don't have any lights on, I can just flip this one on or off with a switch. A thing I didn't realize when I bought it. I never intended to use it for video, but it is a very orange light, even in person. And so it's pretty much just here when I need to come in and do something really quick, and it stays out of the way, and it's very bright, but it's not something I would ever use when video's on because it's just very orange. But it's a cool shape though. But then next to my main key light, I do have an 8-foot Nanlite Pavo tube, which matches the 8-foot one in the corner over here. Right now they're set to different settings, but they are the same light. I also have a Pavo tube mounted under the desk to sort of brighten this area up down here. And I currently have a Pavo tube just sort of hanging out over here. I need to figure this out because I just felt that without that, this corner over here was a little too dark and sad looking, and I need some sort of light to brighten it up. And then I have a Pavo tube on the ground over here. Turning them on is a complete nightmare. I'll talk about later. There's a little Pavo tube here next to my Fuego Firebird and my Joey Decord bobbleheads. Fuego is my hockey hero, and Joey is the reason I wanted to learn how to play goalie last year. And I still have my first two Pavo tubes in the corner over here where they've been for years now, and that basically just helps sort of lighten things up over there. And I do have another Pavo tube mounted to the wall over here, which is sort of strange. I feel like there should be a second one, but this sometimes, especially off camera, it can give a cool lighting effect to the guitars and the wall. And I can also twist it to face me, and it can be a fill light too in a lot of ways. So as we're talking about lighting, one thing that has been great is, since pretty much every light in here is a Nanlite, Nanlite sells this little remote controller called the WSRC-C1. How did I remember that? It's written on the back of it. And this is really inexpensive. It's like $20, $25. And it's got 12 channels. So every light, you can just very easily select which channel you want that light to be on. You can go to that channel, and then you can control the light just from here. It can turn things off, but it's not actually turning off the power. It's just like hot striking the light. So unfortunately, this doesn't solve the problem of needing power, but I can change the color temperature. I can change the brightness. I could cycle through effects and things. And that is really helpful to just be able to do that all from here and switch between trying to remember which light is on which channel. But once I do that, I can switch between them and adjust them super easily. Now, I do often get asked about sound treatment. Right now, I'm using the wireless SM7B monstrosity that I put together for NAB. I really like it because it does a good job at rejecting unwanted noise, but also rejecting handling noise. I don't have a lot of sound treatment in here. I could definitely improve in that area. The room is carpeted, which helps, and there's a bunch of stuff everywhere, which helps, but a lot of the stuff is hard surfaces, tabletops and countertops, so those aren't great for absorbing sounds. But I do have a panel here. It's sort of camouflage. Maybe you couldn't even barely see it. This is a 2-foot by 4-foot panel from a company called Acoustimac. And I like them because they're relatively affordable. I think it's about $100. It's not anything you couldn't make on your own, but it's nice to not have to make it on your own. And they will custom do sizes, colors, depth, and it just works really well. I've had this now for a number of years. I put it on this closet door. If I open that up, there's some storage and stuff in here. And if I close that up to hide, that's organized chaos. I promise it's organized. The reason I put that here is because typically I'm like sitting here facing this way. And so that way it sort of absorbs or stops my sound waves. I also do have a second one of these panels. It's the same size, but it's a different color up here on the ceiling. And the reason for that was because I noticed my sound waves, or the sound waves were bouncing off the closet door and sort of hitting up here on the ceiling. So now they are absorbed in 2 places. I actually got this one first and had it mounted on the closet, but I noticed that the light was shining off of it and casting a blue hue onto me. So that's why I ended up ordering a white one. So not only did it blend in, but then it also acts as a reflector for light, which is something I needed for a fill light. And then I put the blue one up there where the color looks nice and isn't distracting. I do have one other dedicated bit of sound treatment, but it gives me a good chance to talk about this wall. This was really the impetus, I think is the right word. Basically, this is a small room, and I realized a whole side of it was not being used at all. This was all kind of useless space, and I was sort of stuffing things over here on top of desks to film B-roll in front of these paper roller thingies here. So this corner here is now my workspace desk, which I'll talk about in a second. And now I have a floor to ceiling backdrop. And so if I roll this up, what you'll see, I currently have 3 colors, blue, pink, and yellow. I use the blue and pink a lot. I don't use the yellow as much, so I might need to swap that out. These are just the impact roller thingies. They're very inexpensive. And then this is Savage backdrop paper that I got from B&H. The thing I'll say about the rollers though is they come with these plastic chains, and there's a technical term for those. I think it's, sucks. Yeah, those suck. They don't work well. Turns out plastic linked chains, maybe not the strongest thing in the world. So if you can upgrade to the metal version of those, probably save you a lot of frustration. But when this is rolled up, there is a window behind here. But it's funny actually, because when I started filming videos in here, this was my main light source. I didn't have a key light or anything. I just set up the camera here next to the window and let that be my light source. But as I became more of a control freak and wanted to control my lighting, then this window got in the way because the lighting would constantly change and the color temperatures wouldn't match and things. So I just put this Producer's Choice, which is a hilarious name, sound blanket in front of it. So that's kind of covering up in front of the window, which blocks out the light and does block out a little bit of sound. And then I put the paper backdrops over it just because they tend to look prettier. But what I really love about this now is I used to just have kind of a corner of my desk here, and I would put, it was actually a bass drum from a small Aquabats drum set I have, and then I would put a board on top of it, and I would put products on there, and that's where I would do like product B-roll, swing the light around, and I can actually still do something very similar if I just roll over one of my rolling tool chests. Now I can, you know, put something on here that I need to take B-roll clips on, set up a cool lighting setup, or I can totally get rid of that and now have a floor-to-ceiling backdrop, which is really great, and especially for like YouTube thumbnails, combined with the power of Adobe Photoshop's generative fill that they've been releasing. It's kind of amazing because I can take a picture of something like this, and even if you see, you know, the edges of the room or whatever, I can use generative fill to then make it look like the backdrop takes up the whole space. So that's been a huge time saver and lifesaver for some of my thumbnails lately. And so now, as I mentioned earlier, we should talk about the desk setup. I thought it would feel weird to kind of be in the corner. One thing I liked was not having to face a wall while I was working, was being able to sort of, you know, kind of like open air and stuff. But turns out this has not been an issue. So like half the world has their desks up against walls. Turns out it's totally fine. And basically, this is a very simple, small setup. So I still have the base model M1 Mac Mini mounted under the desk with the Hagibis hub that has an internal SSD that I added to it. So that way my 256 gigabyte Mac Mini has a terabyte, or I guess 1200 gigabytes of available storage, which is very nice. I still have the same Vivo arm, but over here I've used the Rodecaster Duo instead of the Rodecaster Pro 2. The reason for that is when I'm here doing stuff, rarely do I ever need more than one XLR input. Sometimes I might need two inputs, maybe, but the Duo is more than enough. I was going to try to make the DLZ Creator XS the main interface here just because I really like it, but there's not an easy way to mount it on an arm, and the Duo just has VESA mount on the back. So VESA in your facea, it won out. You could celebrate with a cerveza. And I just have this little tiny Bluetooth speaker here. It's not good. I mean, it's good as a Bluetooth speaker. It's not a reference monitor. I always edit with headphones, so I have my Rode NTH100 headphones and Logitech MX keyboard, same Apple Magic Mouse, because I'm one of the 5 people on planet Earth that likes the Magic Mouse. I do have my XLR mic here, which is currently, this changes out a lot. I'm currently using the Lewitt Ray because I've really been liking it for video calls, because instead of having to unmute and mute myself with Zoom, I can have it set to mute when I'm close to it. So I can lean in, talk and say something, and then lean back and the mic mutes, lean a little forward a little bit and talk. And it's like, I don't have to do anything and it mutes and unmutes. It's currently on the newer low profile arm, which I really like. This is just a great versatile arm with a lot of reach. So that's been there. And then I have my camera stand for my desk camera. Currently I have the A7 IV here, but I've switched out all of my cameras, the A7S III and the FX3. I have an iFootage head on here that has a Manfrotto plate on it. And then I usually just swap out the lens. So I'll put like my 24mm lens and the Elgato prompter here. And this is what that looks like if I put my camera on that desk stand. Even with the Elgato prompter, now I can be doing a video call looking directly at the prompter, at the person I'm talking to, and have a really nice, comfortable shot with my computer right here. I can bring my mic into the frame. It's very easy. I know it's like kind of course, obviously that's how you would want things to be, but for some reason I like to make things hard on myself, and maybe I've learned making things easier, turns out, might be the way to go. And this is all on the iFootage Cobra 2. It's a small monopod that screws into this base, and it works out really well, especially when I put the prompter on it. It supports everything. I tried to put the camera and the prompter on this boom arm, but it was just too heavy. I'd love to actually have it on an articulating arm kind of like this that I can move and everything, but I can't find one that's strong enough to support camera, lens, and Elgato prompter. Now, when it comes to organization, I've tried really hard to keep things organized, which is why I have all these tool chests. And I know I've seen a lot of people with rolling tool chests and things like this in their YouTube studios lately. And I've even seen criticism of that because it's like, oh, it's another YouTuber with the tool chest. The reason is they're incredibly useful and they're not super duper expensive, but even if they're a little pricey sometimes, they'll last kind of forever. And they're really nice rather than buying like a cheap particle board drawer thing that just starts falling apart after a couple of years. So I really like these. I like that they're all on wheels. I went with the bright red color. I did a whole video about the thought process behind this, even though the studio was different, so you could check that out if you want. But I have this big one here, 2 over there, and 1 in the closet over there. I like them a lot, and I try to keep things very organized. So inside of them, I actually have a video on my second channel I don't know why it's not on this channel, but it's about how I made these drawer organizers, these Drawerganizers right here. There's sort of like systems you can buy to set up like camera drawers and things with these dividers, but they're very expensive. And so I found a way to just do that relatively inexpensively in an afternoon. And I started with 1 or 2 drawers, and I've since sort of put these everywhere, and they work incredibly well. So I have everything labeled. I have a drawer full of cameras and camera stuff, a drawer full of my lenses. Then I've got like, other accessories and peripherals. This drawer here, I don't know if you can see this. This one's really fun because it's all these microphones, and that's pretty fun. And so I try to keep these things organized with like stuff I use most, like my XLR cables. And then down here, I sort of have a lot of markers and things. And then a drawer full of microphone peripherals. You know what the hardest thing, if you have microphones and you have shock mounts and pop filters, storing those things can sometimes be a nightmare. And then I've got a drawer full of boom arms. So if you wonder where the boom arms all go, they all go there. And then down here, some other like headphones, interfaces and things. Now I do still have my closet, which has traditionally been where I store a lot of gear, although a lot of it now has moved out over there. But the shelves really help. I've learned a big reason I got these too is because we live in Southern California where there's a lot of earthquakes. And so having all of my expensive camera gear on these shelves that I put in, which maybe not the strongest ones in the world, seemed a little risky. Keeping expensive things in something like this seems a lot more safe. So I put less dangerous or delicate things on the shelves and more important things in here. So this one is mostly like filters, monitors, audio stuff. If I need like a wireless mic or my drones, that's kind of what's in this cabinet here. And then up here is where I had to put a lot of my older cameras, which I was very sad to not have on display because I love the way they look, like the XL1, the Sony broadcast camera, the red one, it's a GL2, old camcorders. And that was something as I was changing up the studio, there were things that like were just there as decoration. And I kind of realized I needed as little decoration as possible because you can't move that stuff. It kind of like demands to be there. And I wanted to be able to move things and make it modular and versatile. So I found a safe spot for these up here, or I guess safe enough with earthquakes in mind. Found a spot for those up there. And then what I can do is, depending on the video, if I'm doing something where having old, retro vintage type cameras in the background makes sense, I can do a little bit of set design and set dressing, and I can put these out there to be a part of that. And I can't fit in this shot. The other side of this closet is pretty similar. The tool chest here, I wanted the blue one and it only came with this top part, which it was too tall to fit. So I put that here. This mostly has stuff for like, actually, that's a drawer of journals. Otherwise, it mostly has stuff for like instruments. So all of like the peripherals for my guitars and my drums. I used to have a drum set in here, but you want to know what takes up a lot of space? So that's just in a different room, don't worry. And then I have some other gear, some older camcorders, old like cables and things, and then all of my different mic pop filters and windscreens and stuff. I have my little remote for my cameras, and I also have my remote that have the lights on them. I just stuck some magnets to the back, and that way when I'm not using them, I can just stick them to the side of the desk right there. But I use that remote to turn on my camera. I've been recording everything here through the Sony a7S III because I wanted to be able to show you very quickly my main camera rig, which I just did a whole video about, so I'm not going to run through the whole thing. But my main camera, as you might know, is a Sony FX3 on the Impact Lowboy stand and with a whole bunch of stuff connected to it, including the Elgato prompter. If I pull a Josh Groban and raise it up a little bit, now you can see it a little bit better. The trickiest part here, though, has been the prompter. So I just got a very long 20 gigabytes per second cable that runs from my M1 Mac Mini over here. So I can still use the prompter even if the camera's over here and the computer's over there. And then I also have the Elgato Stream Deck pedal with another very long USB cable so it can run under the desk. This has not changed, and I very recently made the video about this, so go watch that video if you want to know about this FX3 rig. The one thing I did change, I just put this on yesterday, was there's a company I found called Knuckle Puck. Been learning how to play hockey over the past year and a half or so, and they make camera handles. They're just based in Los Angeles. Boy, that would have hurt. Basically, they just take hockey pucks, put 3/8 screws in them, and then you can attach these to camera handles, camera mounts, camera cages, or whatever. And now you got this big grippy surface to move things around, and it's just really helpful. And it works quite well, especially on something like this where I didn't want the big long handle sticking out the back to save space. So knuckle puck, who'da thunk? One thing that was very important to me as I was rearranging everything and changing everything was because I did like how stuff looked on camera, and when I 6 years ago did decide where things look best in this room, I wasn't wrong. It was true that kind of putting the camera over here in this corner where it is right now is kind of one of the better looking things. And so I wanted to make sure I could still have my same basic shot that I've had for a long time, which is usually at an angle, the blue wall with all the stuff on it in the background, guitars over here, which I know are confusing because I never talk about guitars on this channel, but it's cool. And then I can move these things in and out of the shot as necessary. But being able to have the same basic composure was something that was really important to me. And traditionally I'd always had it like this, where the desk is straight and I'm sort of at an angle. And I kind of like that. It was just sort of dynamic. But because my desk is on wheels now, I can just go like this. And now I could even face the camera directly, which, without moving the camera, without even stopping recording, very much changed the feel of this shot and this composition. And because this is a height adjustable desk, the versatility has been heightened because I can just crank the handle, raise it up, and now I'm standing behind the desk, which is a very different feel for me presenting, and it's also a different feel for the shot. So that means my one angle that I had before, now I can have two shots, sitting and standing. And that essentially goes for everything. This has been one of my other favorite angles for a long time, just sort of this straight on, centered, more symmetrical shot. And other than now having this desk in the corner instead of some other stuff, this doesn't really look any different. If you saw a video from last year at some point from this angle and you saw this video right now, there's probably not a lot in here that's actually going to look strikingly different, even though the space is very different. And just like with the other shot, now I can also do a standing version of this, which is very, very different. And of course, because the desk is on wheels, if I want to get rid of that and I just want to be able to present without a table, without anything, or like when I was talking about my camera rig and I wanted the thing here. So if I need more space either on camera or to set up stuff while I'm, filming B-roll or other shots, it's just so easy to do all of that. So right there, that's already 1, 2, 3, 4 shots. And there's also this angle over here where I could stand or sit. So that's 5 and 6 different shots just from right here with kind of the same background. One corner, straight on, other corner. And then when you also combine that with different lenses, you get all kinds of different looks. So this is the same angle that I just had, except now I'm sitting and I put a 50mm lens instead of a 24mm lens to get an entirely different look. So that's a lot of versatility in addition to just experimenting and finding new angles, which is something I couldn't do before. Everything was sort of limited to sort of these 1 or 2 spots, and I could try as much as I could to get versatility out of them, but there wasn't as much as, all these different shots. I can even do something I've never done before and just use a solid color as the background instead of all the stuff and all the depth. Not that that's something that I want to do every time, but I kind of like it. And I've never had that versatility before. And again, every angle I can sit, stand, have a desk, or not have a desk. And this is also all without changing lighting setup. So if I decided I wanted to use one of these shots, I would obviously bring in lights and try to make things look a little nicer and a little better, but I've never been able to film with the camera there before ever, I don't think. And even though my desk isn't geared towards filming specifically anymore, if I need to film over here, I have this shot, which I really like and I've used a couple times, where you can kind of see the computer and the setup and everything that I'm working on. And also a thing I forgot to mention about the desk is I used to have the desk higher because I wanted it to block the floor. So it was sort of at this uncomfortable height. When I moved things, I was able to make this actual desk height and then get a separate table separating them. Let me tell you, Offspring are right. You got to keep them separated. There's also this angle that I've been using for video calls and meetings and even some videos and tutorials, because I can sit here, be at my desk, and I can do screen recordings. I can do whatever I need to do or be on a video call, but it's still a pretty decent looking shot. And then, the microphone usually just takes up a little space in the bottom of the frame. I guess it's more like this is kind of how the microphone looks. Why wasn't I just using the mic I'm talking into? And so I want to be at the desk, but don't need to show the computer or the roadcast or whatever I'm doing. I can use this shot. And because I have my handy dandy little remote over here, that's where I can adjust like that 8-foot Pavo tube over there as my fill light. You can kind of see it really does make a difference. And I can just adjust that right here while looking at myself on screen instead of having to make adjustments, come here, test it out, go back, it's just so much more efficient. And a cool thing too is that there's always room to experiment. If I just move the camera to the other side of my desk and my computer, this is not something I'm really a fan of. I don't really like the door corner over there where I just have like my whiteboard for organization and the door and everything. I feel like there's way more interesting stuff in this room, but point being, I do have this angle available if I ever need it or want it, or in the future, I change things up and move things around and now suddenly that's a pretty sweet background or makes sense to use this shot. Just basically, this has now become a space where when I have an idea, I feel like it's possible for me to do that thing instead of having ideas and thinking of the 10 reasons why it would be so difficult to do. And ultimately, that's kind of what was happening. Was I was having ideas, I was wanting to work on stuff, and I just wasn't coming in here that often because there's so much friction in the workflow. Whereas now I literally come in here and try to figure out like, what could I do? It's totally different approach, and it's made things so much better. I finally realized that even if it wasn't finished or perfect, I could still make stuff and get work done during the process of redoing the studio. And that really freed me up a lot. Basically, I had to trust myself and the skills that I've built up over many years to know that I could work with it. I could make things look good and sound good, even if the room and the studio around them was sort of in this state of transition. And turns out that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And that gave me so much more freedom in terms of doing everything right. I didn't feel like I needed to cut any corners. Sometimes when you're working on a project and you're kind of close to the edge, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, see that light over there at the end of the tunnel, and go, okay, I'm just gonna, kind of half butt it right now and finish this thing. I didn't do any of that. I worked on it when I could, and if I needed to take a break at the end of the day or not work on it for a couple of days, I was able to do that knowing it could take as long as it needed to be done well. And that alleviated a ton of stress because I was able to work on what I needed to work on and get the studio redone all at the same time. But I also don't want you to think that that's perfect, because it's very easy to make a video like this and through the magic of editing, make it look like there's just no friction and everything's absolutely perfect. I promise there's still imperfections, there's still friction, there's still messes in here. A very good example is this corner, this light at the end of the tunnel over here. There's a tube light, an 8-foot tube light, which I really like, and there's also a 4-foot one on the ground. I love the effect of them. I kind of need them there. The downside is they are connected to power, but they also have built-in batteries, so that means I can't use my little remote that I use for everything else, where I just leave the light powered on and then turn it on or off here, because they have batteries, so they're just going to stay on all the time, and then when I turn it on, the battery's going to charge. Basically, it's not good for the batteries. The downside to that is that the only way to have them plugged in is basically down in this far corner is where the power switches are for both those lights. Just to drive this point home, every time I want to turn on these two lights, I have to open this cabinet, and then there's a power switch to turn on here, and then to turn on the lights themselves, I kind of have to reach all the way back, and then I have to do the same thing for this one down here. And basically, as much as I love these lights, it's a lighting nightmare. It's a lightmare. But fortunately, there's fewer of those nightmares after redoing the space, but they're still there. And I want to point out that if you're watching a video and you're like, wow, that person's space, they really got it all put together, and then you start to feel bad about yourself because your space isn't as well put together, there's definitely still, I think, in every space for every person at every level, there's always little friction and pain points and imperfections. But despite all of those imperfections, I do think that this is now very much the perfect space for me, and I'm incredibly happy to make stuff here. And speaking of things that are perfect, thanks for everyone who helps support my channel and this space through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to know a little bit more about my workflow and how I make stuff in this space and the stuff that I use to make the stuff in the space, check out these videos right here.